Greetings, my name is Trifler, and I'm a fan of the Sword of Stars strategy games. Sword of Stars 1 was a huge hit in its time and did a lot of new and interesting things, such as 3D real-time battles in a turn-based 4X game, and a new and original ship design system. Sword of Stars 2 expanded on both these systems, but sadly Sword of Stars 2 was not a financial success. Not for any single reason, but I don't want to get into game history in this video. I have two goals with this video. First, this should serve as a definitive guide to ship design for anyone diving into either Sword of Stars 1 or 2, and second, it's my hope that fans of unit design in general will enjoy seeing this video to learn about different ideas. Both players and people who may never play the game should enjoy it from that perspective. Perhaps the ideas from these games will help to inspire others. Ship design, or any unit design, is a passion of mine, and Sword of the Stars 2 did a great job with it. I would say ship design is really at the core of the game, with everything else supporting that. That's largely true of Sword of the Stars 1 as well. After all, it's the ships that are the swords of the stars. I'm going to use Sword of the Stars 2 to go over everything since the graphics are a lot better, but most things apply to Sword of the Stars 1 as well. I'll point out elements that don't exist in the first game. There won't be any gameplay footage in this video. I plan on doing another video going over what I know of the benefits and weaknesses of each of the factions. Those are the two aspects I most wanted to cover after reviewing older guides on YouTube and Steam. If you enjoyed this guide, please consider leaving a like and a comment. For games as old as Sword of the Stars, this is mainly to make it more visible to others who will benefit from seeing it, and not so much about views for the channel. Now, onto the content. Upon entering the ship design screen, we can see that it's dominated by a default ship in the middle here, and you can use your mouse and right click and move it up and down to rotate or roll the ship. There is no way to move left and right. And I also want to mention that I have a long list of things I'm going to cover, so I'll be pausing a lot, but it should be instantaneous for you. Ships in both games are equipped with hardpoints or mounts, whichever term you prefer, and they have small, medium, and large, or heavy. Again, large and heavy are synonymous. So you have the smalls, where you can go anywhere from Gauss cannons, projectiles, you have beams, and you have lasers. Pulse lasers, really. Mediums, you have things like mass drivers and plasma cannons and missiles. Things like point defenses can only go in the small mounts. I don't have any right now, but that's where they would go. Turrets can be individually targeted and blown off. And if you look at something like a medium, you can either have a medium weapon or you can have two small weapons. And if you use small, it does rotate faster. And then the large or heavy can have your heavy weapon, of course, or it can have two medium, or it can have three small. Again, the two mediums will turn faster than one heavy, or three smalls will turn even faster than two medium. However, using three small weapons is underpowered because two mediums would be the equivalent of four small, not three. So do bear that in mind. At the top here, we have armor and structure. Armor is what protects the ship first, and then structure is basically the hull hit points. You do have separate top, bottom, and side armor. And if, say, the side gets beaten through, you can turn the ship or just roll the ship. There's a button in battle to roll the ship and try to absorb some damage on the sides that still have armor. The ship is broken into three sections. You have the command section in the front, you have the mission section in the middle, which determines the main purpose of the ship, and then you have the engine section in the back. Each of these sections has its own armor and structure, and these sections vary a great deal between factions. A different faction armor section will have different hardpoints, positions, different number of small, medium, and large turret mounts. Yeah, it all varies quite a bit. If we go into the weapon testing area, you can see the armor is represented by these green bars. And you can see the standard command section has a lot less armor. And you can go and change it to a hammerhead section, which is wider and has 3 medium mounts instead of 1 medium mount and some small in the case of SolForce here, the humans. And so this has more armor. When it gets hit, it does... different weapons have different damage shapes. So like lasers will do a single column of damage. How much they do varies depending on whether you use a red, green, purple, or blue or X-ray laser. But they all go in a straight line. The missiles you can see do this kind of a half circle pattern. And then same with the mass drivers, they tend to do something similar to this. But different weapons do different shapes. There used to be a website called Rorschach Wiki, something like that, that showed a picture of each of the weapons in the game's damage shape. Unfortunately, that is gone now. It was very useful. Oh, and this weapon testing is extremely useful for testing point defenses, because you can fire missiles and see how it shoots them down. And you can see if you need more in a certain area. The weapon arcs are not just 2D, but also 3D, so they're really more like weapon cones. And so you have to worry about missiles coming in from the top and from the bottom, and not just from the sides and stuff like that. Right, and the different weapons have, well, all weapons have different firing modes, which are here. You start with the default, and then you've got concentrate fire, ripple fire, spread fire, and alpha strike. So if you do the default fire, or well, you have hold fire, but you normally would only use that in battle. You wouldn't set that into the design. So default fire is just going to fire as soon as the weapon is ready to fire. It doesn't really have any modes. The concentrate fire is telling the weapons of this type to focus on a single target, and if they can't shoot at it, they'll just kind of sit without doing anything. So I don't use that one very much. Ripple fire will fire at the target, and it will divide up each of the weapon groups and space them out with an equal amount of time between each group. So for example, this 3-barrel turret, it would not be able to fire different barrels separately, but it would count that as one group, and it counts these as one group, and so on. And then spread fire is going to try to shoot at as many different targets as it can. Again, I don't use that very much. And alpha strike will hold fire until it can fire all of weapons of this specific type simultaneously. So what's good about that is the enemy AI in this game is very good at dodging, in both games actually. And so, but when it starts dodging is when the first weapon group fires. So if you have it on, let's see, ripple fire, for example, it will start dodging when that first shot is fired. If you have it, and then your subsequent shots have to try to make up for that. If you have it on alpha strike, then it doesn't get that chance to dodge. Now, of course, this is only if it's a one-on-one engagement. If you have other ships firing, then it'll be trying to dodge their fire, and it gets quite chaotic. But in general, the slower-moving projectiles, I prefer the alpha strike. And then for faster-moving stuff, I'll sometimes use the ripple fire. I have a couple of saves that I want to load to show off some designs I made with Ripple and Alpha Strike. So I'll be right back. Alright, I've loaded up a game with my Loa game, and I've loaded my Slammer design, and this design has lots of mass drivers and a heavy driver in the large turrets. I've set them to both of these to Alpha Strike, the medium and the heavy. There we go. So now this works really well in battle, but it is important to note the heavy weapons are considered a different type, so they don't necessarily sync up together with the mediums. They are alpha striking all the heavy weapons together and alpha striking all the medium drivers together, not necessarily the medium and heavies together. Now I should also mention that this ship has a strafe section instead of a standard command section. That means that these weapons in front here all have a fixed straight ahead firing arc. Basically just maybe 5 degrees instead of the normal wide arc. They aren't turrets as such, they just fire straight ahead. So they have to turn the whole ship to aim, which isn't too much of a problem. But basically you're trading off the turret arc for more weapons when you use a strafe section. And you can see it here. Yeah, and if you hover over each of these sections, you can get a basic tooltip. It's not very informative, but it can be helpful. You're getting a general idea, not a quantitative details. Alright, next I'm going to show my Plasmata design. This is a similar ship with plasma cannons instead of mass drivers, and I used the ripple fire for these. This one does use a hammerhead section instead of the strafe section, because I'll show you why in a second. So if we fire, let it cycle once here. Okay, so it does this pattern. You can see if you watch the turrets here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the heavies fire on their own. You got one heavy up here and 2 heavy turrets down here. And so these travel a lot faster, and they're more accurate as well. So I find them more effective for the ripple fire. And this puts some more of a consistent fire on target. Now these heavy turrets, I could use these normal plasma cannons in here now to have 2 plasma cannons. That's what I would use if I hadn't researched this one yet. But once you have this heavy plasma cannon turret, it's a triple barrel, and so this is triple mediums instead of triple smalls, like the normal, like what I showed you earlier. And so but this doesn't fire all at once. It does 1, 2, 3 each time. And so that means that if I was using Alpha Strike, it still does the same thing. It can't fire all 3 barrels at once. And so it's more conducive for ripple fire just by design. And again, these do not sync with these necessarily. Alright, and then you have also these targeting modes. Let me put these on hold fire real quick. Oh, I missed it. Okay. So you can tell it to target just specific targets. All is almost always fine. But let's say you only wanted it to fire at cruisers. You can do that. It'll just ignore larger ships. Or you can tell it to target Leviathans and ignore the smaller ships. Those are settings you would probably just use in battle. You wouldn't want your design to come with that automatically, because you can change all these in battle. But if you change these in the design, then they will start every battle with these settings. Whereas if you change them in battle, it's reset at the end of battle. Now I do have one counter example that I'm going to load. Just a moment. So like I said earlier, I don't usually like to use ripple fire with mass drivers, but for the Tarka, I found an interesting situation where it works nicely. In this case, they have, if you combine the hammerhead section with their armor mission section, they have 2, 2, 2, and 2. And if we go into the TEP weapon tester, we can see these fire in a very steady pattern. In fact, it's so good that there is no interruption between when they all fire and when the first one fires again. Whereas you might have noticed in the other examples, they'll ripple fire through and then there's a gap before they start again. So far I've only been able to get a setup like this with the Tarka. That doesn't mean the others can't do it, but I haven't found one. But of course this can still do Alpha Strike. If we get a particularly dodgy enemy, we can switch in battle. And these particle cannons just sort of do their own thing. I have them set to default. It may look like they're alpha striking, but they just both have a clear line of fire, so they can fire they both fire at the same time from the start. If we fire to the side, the hammerhead can fire some to the side, but the strafe cannot. And while we're loading saves, I thought I'd show off some missile tech, since I got some really good missile rolls with my Loa game. So here we have the MIRV missiles, which you have to research, of course. So if we fire these, you can see, there it goes, where is it? There. It bursts into a group of missiles, and they come down in an S pattern, or a spiral pattern. And this makes them much, much harder for enemy point defenses to shoot down. So those are very cool. However, they do take a large mount instead of a medium mount. So if you have regular missiles, they will fire 2 missiles out of a large mount. MIRV missiles will fire 1 MIRV missile, but as you saw, it does turn into 5 or 6 missiles, so they're quite effective. Next, let's see here. I have IOBMs, or interorbital ballistic missiles. These are even more powerful, or even larger than the heavy planet missiles that you can get for your planets. And I believe these are the heaviest missile in the game. Sword of the Stars 2 only, though. You have the heavies and the regulars that unlock at the same time. And as far as I can tell, I mean, you don't get more of the regulars. So as far as I can tell, the heavies are mainly for better at bombarding planets. You kill more population, destroy more infrastructure. And then the other thing I wanted to show is the missile platform. This is the Loa missile platform. So it has 4 medium mounts on top, 4 medium mounts on the bottom. You can load these with either missiles or other weapons, other mediums or even small weapons. But if you want the range, then of course the missiles are the way to go. You can also load on Polaris missiles, which are vertically launched heavier missiles than the regular missiles. There's only one Polaris missile. And then you also have 4 small on top and bottom, which I always load with point defense lasers. And then, unfortunately, there's no way to put like point defenses on here and another weapon here and here. That would be really nice, but can't do that on this one. Alright, I'm going to switch back now. Alright, before I finish up with weapons, I want to talk about these weapon stars. So if you look at something like a supply ship, so these we have missiles on, and it has some small lasers. These are UV lasers, purple lasers. So if you star the missile, excuse me, sorry about that. So the star is the range the ship will attempt to maintain. So if you have it set to the missile, the ship will stay at the maximum range of the missile and try to stay there. It won't get closer, it won't get further away. The only exception would be if the enemy is faster than this ship, then it loses the ability to maintain distance. But it will still do the best it can. So effectively it will be kiting the enemy. So this is really good for your supply ships, your command ship, and stuff like that. If you leave it on the default, which is often, well, when you create a new design, or even if you just change any setting, like a weapon or something, unfortunately the game just randomizes which weapon gets the star. I would prefer it if it defaulted to the longest range weapon, or even if it defaulted to the closest range weapon, at least then it would be consistent. But it is random, and there's nobody who can change it now, so just keep that in mind. You want missiles to always be selected if you have missiles on the ship. So if you did have the lasers selected, you would have the supply ship, your command ship, just go up to the front line and fire at the enemy at point blank range, which is really a bad idea for these weak ships. So now the AI for other factions, if you're not playing any faction you're not playing, does something different. It actually divides its fleet into 2 or even 3 groups, and it will keep its supply ships and command ship further back from the ships fighting on the front line. And this is fine initially, but the problem is they don't fall back effectively if you break through their front line. And so, whereas when you use this star and you use the standoff mode in battle, your ships will keep falling back and kite the enemy, which is very effective. Another thing I wanted to mention is, remember I mentioned the way the AI dodges very effectively when you're firing at them. This is something that the player really can't do effectively, because you can't be hitting dodge for every single ship, for every single shot the enemy makes, especially since you can't pause the game during battle. So you have to use these combat modes that they give you in battle in order to maximize your ability to compete. And there are so many little battles in Sword of the Stars 1 and 2 that anything you can automate is very helpful. Alright, so Sword of the Stars 1 doesn't have these particular firing modes that I just spent a lot of time going over. So I'm going to show you weapon groups in Sword of the Stars 1 next, so I'll be right back. We're now in the Sword of the Stars 1 design screen. I have a Tarka ship here. And this one has a strafe section, and if I select the weapons, you can see that these are the narrow arcs I was talking about earlier. In Sword of the Stars 1, you have one plane, even though it is 3D battles, the ships are all arranged on a single plane. So they can go up and down, but not by much. And in Swords of the Stars 2, there are 3 planes, which allows ships to move in formation above one another. And they can tilt and fire down or up and stuff like that. But they are not as freeform as something like Homeworld, for example. And then for the weapon groups, you would use this window over here in Sword of Stars 1 instead of clicking on the weapons on the ship itself. So here we have 8 small sniper cannons, and here we have a larger arc for the middle top one, and then it has the 2 medium plasma cannons on the bottom, some bottom side cannons, and a top rear. So the way I've got this set up, if you click on this button, this triangle here, you can go to weapon groups. And by default, all of the weapons are on, excuse me. You can have a maximum of 3 weapon groups. And essentially these weapon groups serve the same purposes as the distribute fire mode. I forget what it's called exactly, where it shoots as many different targets as possible in Sword of Stars 2. So I find from my experience that putting the rear section at least in weapon group 3, you have to change back to actually select the weapon layout. Putting this into weapon group 2 or 3, a different weapon group, allows it to be more effective at shooting enemies that get behind. It will still shoot at other enemies, but the AI seems more inclined to do so if it's in a different weapon group. So you would select your weapon group, you click on the weapon, and that changes the weapon group number there. In this case, since I have a strafe section, I made the front section group 1, I made the middle group 2, and I made the rear group 3. If I had, say, a hammerhead section here, then I would probably just leave these all as group 1, because then these front turrets can turn to the side. But the main thing here is by setting these weapon groups, you're making the AI a little more inclined to fire at targets of opportunity. And yeah, so I'll switch back now. Oh, and I'll just mention that I like to change the rear mainly because it will never be able to shoot at the targets at the front anyway, so it doesn't interfere with anything. We're back, and you may have noticed that Sword of Stars 1 had the drawn arcs, and Sword of Stars 2 does not. And I mentioned that part of the reason is because Sword of Stars 2 has more elevation and declination to consider, so they're more of a firing cone, but even that could have been drawn. But another thing that I have to mention is the Sword of Stars uses pixel perfect or pixel accurate targeting when Sword of Stars 1 does not. So that means even though in both games you can target individual turrets, you can target specific mission sections, the front, middle, rear, in Sword of Stars 2 you can actually target specific pixels on the hull. And what this means for the turrets is they will automatically turn until they reach a point, say for these ones here, they will turn until they reach a point where firing would hit a pixel of the ship, and that's where they will stop. Whereas in Sword of Stars 1, they are hand-drawn arcs. And I believe the first game I've heard of, anyway, to use pixel-accurate targeting was Doom 2. I'm not certain they're the first, but they certainly made a big deal about it when the game came out. And so basically, instead of a hitbox, if you fired between their legs, for example, it would hit the floor instead of a hitbox. And you would have to actually hit a pixel of their character to hit them. And so that's the technology that Sword of Stars 2 used. So quite cool. If you target a specific part of the ship, you're not going to notice for most of the weapon types, but some of the beams are accurate enough that they will actually hit near where you target. Something like Gauss cannons or medium drivers, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. They're just all over the place. Next, I'm going to go over the tech options up here. And these were down at the bottom in Sword of Stars 1. These are the same protective coatings in both games. So at the start, you get polysilicate alloy. And then you can research magno ceramic, and then a third one. And then there's also reflective coating and advanced reflective coating. And so these top ones are, well, you'll notice here it adds more armor. But that's not the main thing these are used for. In addition to that, they also make it so a percentage of ballistic shots, such as Gauss cannons or medium drivers, will just bounce off and either do no damage or much reduced damage. The polysilicate will help some. The magnoceramic helps a ton. Not so much against heavy drivers, but certainly against Gauss cannons, it will bounce most of them. The magnoceramic. And then there's the third one. You're pretty much immune unless they've researched the armor-piercing rounds that you can research. However, energy weapons are not affected by that chance to bounce. And that's where the reflective coatings come in. So, as you may guess, they will do the same kind of thing. They'll make the lasers bounce off. They also help with emitters, which I don't have here, but they are kind of like chain lightning in a fantasy role-playing game. They'll hit the ship and then bounce off into neighboring ships and do a reduced amount of damage to them. Reflective coatings will not bounce those emitters, but it will reduce the damage they do. And then for things like beams, now the manual says that the reflective coating does not affect beams, but I believe from my experience in playing the game, it seems that only is the case for the phasers and these like green beamers, UV beamers, and X-ray beamers. They seem to do reduced damage. But that is only my perception from watching battles. It seems pretty, I'm pretty confident about it, but I don't have any actual reference material to refer to. Next, I'm going to see, we've got supply, energy, and crew. Now, these are only in Sword of Stars 2. In Sword of Stars 1, you didn't have to worry about any of that, and you could just put whatever weapons you want in any hardpoint, and it wouldn't matter. In Sword of Stars 2, it cares about that because supply takes the place of fuel. So you don't have fuel tankers, you have supply ships. And if you, you're fine until you reach this maximum. And if you go over the maximum, then you get a rate of fire debuff. And so you definitely don't want to have a debuff right from the start of the battle. And same story with energy. And if you take damage during the battle, you can get critical hits that will reduce your supply and your energy and your crew. And then you're in even worse shape. So you want to leave a fair margin, if at all possible. Supply is also used for this endurance thing. Endurance the T is turns. So this is the number of turns the ship can travel on the strategic map. This is for the ship by itself, not for the fleet. So this one's only one turn, so it would of course travel with supply ships, which would extend its range. However, anything you can add is going to help the whole fleet to move further. You can supplement these by adding modules. In the back here, you can add either a supply module, which they call the camel. This adds 20 supplies. Or you can add an energy module, which will... Here you have fission, but you can also research fusion to improve it more. And on larger ships, you have larger versions of these modules. So if you didn't have enough energy, you can, example, add this thing for that. If you don't need it, don't add it, because it does cost a fair amount of money. But you will always benefit from adding the supply module, because it does extend the range of your fleet. An exception might be for certain factions, such as the Hivers, where you don't need to, your fleet doesn't need to travel out far. But I'll get into that in the faction video. On the sides here, the SolForce ships can have, they also have besides the supply module, they have the crew module called the Caravan and the marine module called Semper Fi. I'll just refer to them as what they do from now on. Crew module will add 20 crew and 10 supply. So this is going to give you more crew to supplement losses in battle. And it does also help some against boarding. There is boarding in this game. There's a boarding mission section, which fires boarding pods. How effective the boarding troops are depends on your faction, and which faction you play also can affect how many boarding pods are in this mission section. But yeah, having the more crew will help with that. However, having the marine module will help a lot more. They are actually armed troops trained to repel boarders. So often you'll see the default designs will often have a marine module, crew module, and energy. Let's see, maybe they did it here. Yes, that's exactly, well, they didn't do the energy, they did the supply. But anyway, this is a common setup for the AI to default to. However, also keep in mind, different sections will have a different number of module slots, and this will also vary by faction as well. So you don't always have 2 slots on the mission section like the command and control mission section here. Notice the humans, SolForce, has the AWACS disk. The other factions mostly just have lots of antennas. But anyway, this command and control has 1 module slot, and it has a new module called the Hannibal, but this is the Admiral's escape pod is what it does. And so if you have this and you lose your command ship, then your Admiral will survive the battle and you can reassign them. If you don't have this, then well, goodbye Admiral. There might still be a chance that they survive, I'm not entirely sure, but a lot of the times they die. Let's talk about drones now. SolForce has this drone carrier mission section. All the factions have a drone carrier mission section. The humans are interesting though in that they have a hangar bay, and when they launch drones they come out really quick, one at a time from this hangar bay. Other factions all have their drones attached to the side of the hull. And I did see one video where the person thought that there was just one drone here, because that's what it shows here, but that's not the case. So you can go right-click on this arrow to the drone, and the drones are customizable. The starting drone is, you can change the weapon only, but you can use any small weapon, and it has 2 of them. The starting drone does not have any tech options available, but you can research an advanced drone where you can choose armor coatings for more protection, and it'll switch to a single medium mount for most factions, and for the Morgai, they will have 3 smalls on the default drone and 2 mediums, I believe, on their advanced drone. There are also other drone types you can research. And so, let's say we decided to make a green beamer drone. So we can go back to our cruisers and drone carrier. So we would select, see that's on the default drone, we would select the green beam drone. And that's how you choose what drone you want to use. Do note that this default drone here, even if you delete this, it doesn't remove it from this list, which is unfortunate, but it's not a big deal. Just keep it in mind. On a drone carrier, probably you would want to have, well, you would want point defenses if you had them. I don't have them right now. And you would want missiles to stay at range. And make sure you star your missiles, always. For the coatings, you can see that the armor rating and hull rating do vary by mission or by section of the ship. And so, if you had different coatings available, you could, I'll show it later, but you could mix and match your coatings to make it more balanced if you so desired. Also, another thing I do is, if you have, say, an armor section, your frontline combat ship, you can do something, if you don't have a lot of money, or if you're concerned about how expensive it is, you can put protective coatings on the front and middle and not on the rear, because usually these are nose to nose with the enemy slugging it out, and the rear is the last to get hit. Maybe more so on the human ship since their rear section is so big, but on most that's the case. So I find it can be very effective to save money by doing this, especially with the more expensive coatings. Other common sections at the start of the game, you always start with standard, command section, and the hammerhead section for all the factions, and then you always have the armor, command and control, supply, and so on. I'll discuss that more in a little bit. Right now, let's talk about prototyping. Prototyping is new to Sword of Stars 2. It was not in Sword of Stars 1. And the idea here is that it costs a lot more for your first ship than subsequent ships in any given design. This was not very popular when the game came out, primarily not because of the idea, but because they made it way too expensive. I probably would have made it half as much as they made it. There is a mod on the internet that completely removes prototyping. I haven't used it because I don't want to remove it entirely. I would rather have it reduced, but there is not, to my knowledge, a mod that just reduces it. So if we look at, okay, so you see the design that they created at the start here normally costs 100,000, and if I change the mission section, it's now 338,000, so a little over 3 times as much. I think SolForce actually gets a reduction on the prototype costs because I've seen it as high as 8 times for some other factions. It does vary by faction. It does vary by your design as well. your modules, your weapons, your ship sections all factor into it. In the, I don't know, one of the last big patches they made for Sword of Stars 2, they made it so that prototyping is free on turn 1. So, for example, a lot of these designs have serious flaws with them if you know what you're doing. So you can design a new ship and submit it, and it will be added fully prototyped, but only on turn 1. So, for example, it doesn't have the missile starred on the supply ship, so you could star the missile and then resubmit it, and it would automatically be prototyped. You don't have to reprototype it. And I'll talk about retrofits in a minute, but first, for the naming scheme, I want to mention when you submit a new design called supply, I'll just demonstrate. It automatically adds Mark II, and so on. So now, if you delete this design, what has always bothered me is it doesn't free up Mark II again. You delete this, and it will create a new design, and it will automatically go to Mark III. Likewise, more importantly, if I delete supply, I cannot create another supply. It will be Mark III. Nothing you can do about that though, so just be aware of that. And then regarding refits, or retrofits as the game calls it, you don't have the technology for that at the start. You have to research orbital dry docks, which is one of the first techs you can research, but it's not available on turn 1. And so that is unfortunate. It's unfortunate in that if, for this example I gave before, if I switch this star to the missile and I save it, the game does not recognize that as a refit because it recognizes this as a completely new design. And what this means is the supply ships that you start the game with cannot be refit to this Mark II version once you do research orbital dry docks. So now another option would be to not create this prototype at the start and instead wait till you get orbital dry docks and then make this change. And then you can refit your existing ships to that. So you can, when you're making a prototype, anytime in the game, you'll want to consider what could be changed in a retrofit. And I'll go into that next. So since Sword of the Stars 1 doesn't have prototyping, it also doesn't have refits. So I'm going to load a game now for showing. That's much further along in the game, so I can show refits properly. Okay, so here I have a SolForce game where I'm much further along. I've researched more protective coatings, and I've researched plasma focusing. Plasma focusing doesn't affect anything in combat. It basically makes it so that the ship carries more supplies in addition to these modules or in place of these modules. So that's something you can add. So once you research orbital dry docks, you gain this retrofit design button down here in the bottom right. And so once you have that, you can click on it. You select a design, you click on that, and then it will limit the weapons listed to the weapons that are eligible for a refit. So you can change any weapon to another weapon of the same type. So if you have, you would start with, say, UV laser, and you might want to retrofit it to X-ray lasers, which are more powerful. So you can change between the lasers. You cannot change to a beam. You cannot change UV laser to UV beams, for example. You cannot change to Gauss. The missiles, the mediums cannot be changed to missiles if they're mass drivers. Or if they're missiles, you cannot change it to something else. So same deal with the heavy. So you can just change weapons to the same type. The other thing you can change is you can do anything you want to with the modules. You can take them off, you can add them, you can change them to a different one. So that's available. You cannot change any of the ship sections, you cannot change any of the protective coatings, and you cannot add or remove plasma focusing. If you do something you're not allowed to do, such as that, the retrofit box goes away and the price goes way up to the prototype cost, because now you're making a new prototype instead of a retrofit. So it's quite limited, but it's still useful in certain cases. It's less useful for the starting default designs because, for example, here, I think it always puts mass drivers on the default armor ship. Armor is your combat ship. And you might want missiles. I should add that if you just have 2 missiles, it can be completely worthless because they'll just shoot them down. But if you have a bunch of ships, then it becomes effective. Lastly, going back to the modules, you'll notice there is a point defense module now. This becomes unlocked when you research your first point defense weapon, whatever type it might be. It's a little deceiving because it calls it a point defense module, but it's actually a module that adds 2 small hardpoints. For the humans, SolForce, it's got a module on the side, or well, in this case, on this cruiser, the side, it's with a small hardpoint on top and bottom. And you are allowed to use any small weapon you want. So for the humans here, since it's on the side, you might choose to just add more lasers for more firepower. It's entirely up to you. A lot of faction ships, the point defense, they have a module slot on the bottom front, and you can put a point defense module there. And what that does is you have a small hardpoint facing forward and a small hardpoint facing back. And then, since there's usually not many point defense weapons on the bottom of ships, this allows you to add some. And however, that is still just one point defense laser firing forwards. So it's not very much, but it's better than nothing. Okay, that's all for ships that I have, but there is one other thing you can customize that is not in the ship designer. That is your naval base. So at your home world, you start with, under fleets, under stations, you start with what they just call a base, but it's a naval base. And if you click this arrow, then you actually have this option here, and you can right-click to retrofit it. And this allows you to choose weapons. Now, at the start of the game, turn 1, for example, it doesn't have any weapons. You go into the station manager, and you can click on the naval base, and you have these modules you can add to it. I usually add a combat module on turn 1 because you can get random encounters, and that can help defend. You don't necessarily have to. It's fairly expensive. 1 or 2 is good, I think. And so once you've added one, I can't show added one because it's full right now. But then you can go into this screen over here. It has to be finished building. So if you add 1, you have 1 in slot, and I have 3, so I have 3 slots. So by default, it comes with heavy drivers. In my experience, these are completely useless against any of the random threats that may attack. It doesn't have the range, it doesn't have the accuracy. If you switch to particle beams, then you get accuracy, but you still don't have range. So I always use missiles. If you add a bunch of slots, you might choose a mixture. But most of the time, missiles are the best way to go for this. I will say, if you go back to the station designer, so you can add up to 3 with this first, for the level that you start at. And these don't cost any maintenance. They just have a construction cost. It's when you upgrade the station that you get a large increase in maintenance cost. For example, at level 3, this is costing almost 100,000 per turn. So it's very expensive. If you build a new naval base, it starts at level 1. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe that has 1 slot available. 1 combat module slot. Anyway, so that's how you do that. Next, I'm going to briefly show the research screen. So I don't want to go into too much detail in this, just because this is a ship design video. But obviously, the research has a lot to do with what kind of ships you can design. Here you can see the laser point defenses. Let's see, over under engineering, you have orbital dry docks here for allowing you to create retrofits. Under industrial, this materials applications adds the strafe section in Sword of the Stars 2. This is the same as researching Waldo units in Sword of the Stars 1. Under missiles, you have heavy planet missiles, which is the same as Sword of the Stars 1. It adds a heavy missile that your planets can shoot. Here you have heavy ship missiles. This adds the Polaris missiles that I showed earlier. Microfusion drives is a good one. This one speeds up the flight speed of your missiles. Also of your missiles. So this has the side effect of also increasing missile launcher rate of fire, because the missile launchers will not fire again until the missile that it already fired until it explodes. That can be either when it hits the target or when it runs out of fuel. So by having it travel faster, it'll reach the target faster, it'll explode faster, and then you can launch again. So that's pretty valuable. And yeah, so there's lots of stuff in here. In Sword of the Stars 1, you can right-click and move left and right to go navigate through the different trees. In Sword of the Stars 2, you can click on these buttons, or you can click on these arrows to do the same thing. Torpedoes, different factions have different better odds for different types. SolForce has better odds for these photonic torpedoes, harking back to Star Trek. And then a lot of factions use these fusion torpedoes. These are tracking torpedoes that can be shot down. Photonic torpedoes cannot be shot down, but they're not tracking. You also have these disruptor torpedoes. These don't do so much damage, but they short out the enemy, so their weapons will go offline for a while and stuff like that. One of the things that Sword of the Stars 2 was very well known for is their research randomization or feasibility, feasibility. So there's 2 things. One is some of these branches are not guaranteed for every game. You have some guaranteed ones, which are like these yellow ones, which you will always have access to. These dark lines here, you do not always have access to. So I don't have a good example, but sometimes there's a tech up here, and there may or may not be a branch that appears once you research this. If this branch does not appear, and there's only, then you may not be able to research that. Sometimes there are multiple paths to get to it, and you may get one and not the other. If you lose if you don't get access to either one, then you can never get that tech. Well, you can steal it from the enemy, but you can't research it. Then there's feasibility. And so for these darkened lines, you do have a branch here, but you first have to do a feasibility study, and it will tell you the odds of whether or not you can get it, and it also affects how much it will cost. Let me see, do I have one? Oh yeah, here. Here's one I did a feasibility study on. So they determined, it doesn't give me a percentage because I already attempted to research it, and they determined they could not do it. So I cannot research this technology. If it had, say, a 60% chance, then the odds would be good that I can get it, but it will cost more than normal. Or if it's down at like 10%, odds are good that they will try and just fail, like what happened here. Oh, one other thing, let me go back in. If you go to the Rider technology in Sword of Stars 2, you have the drones. These are the advanced drones that let you improve the coatings and weapons and stuff for your drones. You also have the drone satellite, which lets you deploy drones in when you're defending your systems. And then you have these battle riders. You had these in Sword of Stars 1 as well, but these go into much larger sizes in Sword of Stars 2. So these are not drones, these are crewed ships, but they don't have their own FTL drive. They instead are attached to a larger ship that has an FTL drive, and they detach in battle. So they function very much the same as drones, but they are bigger. So in Sword of Stars 2, these first one you get will deploy destroyers, which are the same kind of destroyers as in Sword of Stars 1, except now they don't have an FTL. Then you can get cruisers that attach to a dreadnought. Then you can get, well, I think beyond that, it depends on the faction. You can get dreadnoughts that attach to a Leviathan, and so on. Okay, so lastly, I'm going to show some dreadnoughts just for fun. I'll be right back. Stick around though, because I have something I want to say at the end, and I'm going to cover ship traits as well. Alright, so here I have a SolForce dreadnought. SolForce's dreadnoughts are considerably better than their cruisers. We go into the weapon testing. Can fire. I have the mass driver set to Alpha Strike. It's right now in this game I only have a standard command section and an armor mission section. So not too advanced, but it's good to get dreadnoughts as soon as you can as the SolForce, because they do have much better dreadnoughts than they do cruisers. And you can see they have very large armor here. They have much better broadsides on the armor section. If you go to, let me see here, do I have, no I don't. I'll show it in one of the other saves, but the forward firing can be much more effective with the different ship sections. Apparently I left these modules empty to save money. Okay. And then I want to talk about this down here. Your ships can earn traits. Well, I shouldn't say earn. It's a one-time thing. You do have to use them in battle before it has a chance to appear. There are a number of different traits. Some of them have pros and cons. Some of them are actually negative. But most of the time, I find it's just hard to get a trait that matches your ship. Because, for example, this is Aces of Eights. It's going to increase the rate of fire, but it also increases the radar signature, so it's easier to detect. Okay, so this is pretty decent on this ship. I'm glad I have it. I think it's worth the radar signature because it's a dreadnought. It's going to get detected anyway. It's a big ship. However, say this was a supply ship. This would be a terrible thing to get on a supply ship. Or a command ship. You don't want your command ship easily detected. And then there are a whole bunch of different traits. So I wanted to mention that. You can get a trait for every, I believe it's every prototype. So if you make refits, they will retain the same trait. And also, a lot of the time, your ship simply won't get one. You're not guaranteed to get a trait. There's just a random chance to get a trait, and it's random what trait you get. So be aware. Okay, I'm going to show another dreadnought now. All right, here's a Hiver dreadnought that I designed. So I've got lots of these heap rounds, high explosive armor piercing. And I've got the third and strongest of the ballistic protective coatings. I do not have the advanced reflective coating. I think, if I remember correctly in this save, I was not able to research it. For modules, I've added GOOP modules. This is a liquid that can be used to fill holes in your armor. It's heal over time, and there is a limited supply, but I've got a good amount of it on here, so it can last a while. But it does mean I can't put other modules here. In this case, I didn't need more energy, and those are the only other options, so I'm not losing for this particular design. On the front here, I could have put on other stuff. I should also mention this. You can look at the cost for what size it is. This is a cruiser size module. These are dreadnought size modules, much bigger. So I could have, for example, put point defenses and so on. On the sides here you have, okay, these are special module slots that can either be used for regular modules. Notice it allows me to put this escape module on here. It would be completely worthless because this is not a command ship. It doesn't rescue any crew, it doesn't do anything. It would just be worthless, so don't make that mistake. But what this module is special is about is it can put on a torpedo launcher, which is what I have here. So you can do that. And then up here, it looks like I put on some point defenses. So let's go into the weapon testing. You can see the Hivers have lots of armor. That's what they're really known for. So there's the torpedoes. These are the fusion torps that are tracking but can be shot down. So not a whole lot of forward-facing fire on this ship. If we turn to the broadside, much better. I can set it to Alpha Strike. Now notice these fusion torps, they're turning and coming back. In battle, that works, but it does take a long time, so for the torpedoes to come around. So this is again standard command with an armor section. Okay. So that's the Hiver dreadnought I have to show. Now I'm going to show one more. Alright, here I have a Loa Dreadnought. The Loa are only in Sword of Stars 2. All the other factions are in Sword of Stars 1. So this one has the heavy combat lasers, which are very powerful spinal mount weapons. They only fire straight ahead. So this ship has devastating frontal attack instead of a strong broadside like the others. Then I've got neutron beams here, the next step up from the particle beam. Now the GOOP does seem to repair its own, or the ship section that it's in first. So for example, by putting this one in front, damage to the command section seems to get prioritized over damage to the mission section in the middle. But it will do the rest of the ship after. So just add the plasma cannons. Don't have the fusion cannons yet. Okay, so you can see that this uses almost all the energy. That's probably not the best. So I could, for example, this would not be able to switch to fusion cannons. It wouldn't have enough energy. So what would I do here? I could switch these to mass drivers. That would work. In that case, I would go to Alpha Strike on those. Yeah, that helped quite a bit. Another option would be to replace some goop with fusion generator. So, different things you can do. Alright, so lastly, I have a disclaimer I want to make for anyone considering getting Sword of the Stars 2. While they did fix pretty much most of the bugs that they had to deal with, there is one bug that definitely needs to be mentioned. On some computers, the game just won't run, and even after a year, they were never able to identify what was causing the problem, so they weren't able to fix it. And then when they went under, they weren't able to keep working on it. However, since you'll know right away whether this bug affects you, you can return the game if you're affected. We've come to the end of the things on my list that I wanted to cover. Is there anything specifically about ship design that I missed? Please let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to see me cover another part of the game, let me know that too. Well, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Thank you.